Good day, fellow AVIAPRENEURS all over the world. AVIAPRENEURS podcast today is very special. I have a great friend and a special guest, someone with almost 50 years of experience in the general aviation industry, Mr. Rick Wolfer. Good morning, Rick. How are you?
I'm doing just fine, Ed. Good to be here.
Thank you very much for giving us the time and the opportunity to talk to you. So, Rick, today we have a lot of things to talk about with almost half a century in the aviation industry. Wow, that's a lot of time. I'm very impressed and honored to be talking to you.
Thank you.
So, you worked with the US Air Force and the US State Department for 21 years. And then you have worked for all the major US international trip planning companies. Air Routing International, which later became Rockwell Collins and Collins Aerospace, Base Ops, part of World Fuel Service, Universal Weather and Aviation, and Jeppesen. And then you took that experience and joined a corporate flight department. You worked for Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft, and you were to his private 91 FAA Part 91 flight department, and you were flying the aircraft domestically in the US for a major sports team. I'm just gonna read the sports team names because I'm not very familiar with them. Seattle Mariners, Seattle Seahawks, and the Portland Trail Blazers, correct?
That is correct.
And then you spent some time with Part 135 aircraft charter operators, and then you decided to move ahead and set up your own international trip planning company, Atlas Trip Support, which was previously known as Global Trip Support. Currently, you're working and you're living in your 45 feet Class A motorhome. Wow, this is very impressive. You're touring the US, visiting clients from state to another. And when you're not touring the US, you're based in Parker, Arizona on the Colorado River. That's very impressive. I'm sure with all 50 years, you have a lot of stories, a lot of experience and knowledge to share with us. But let me start with one question. With a lot of efforts, you can make a lot of money, but it's not easy to gain time back. If you would go back 50 years ago, would you do this again?
Well, the aviation industry does not certain areas of the aviation industry. You're going to do it because you love it and it's passion. But it's not as rewarding financially as it might be for other industries. But at the same time, I continued in my aviation profession based on the fact that I loved aviation and I wanted to make a difference with my own company, and my motivation was not financial. It was more of service than anything else.
So you always knew that you wanted to be in aviation since your beginnings, correct?
I did. When I was growing up, my father was a chief mechanic for a helicopter company in Oakland, California, and one of the very first helicopter companies that flew between two airports. It was called SFO, San Francisco Oakland Helicopter Company, and they were based in Oakland and they flew back and forth between San Francisco and Oakland. There was another company in LA that did the same thing, and there was another company in New York that did the same thing in the 60s and the 70s. And all that kind of went away because basically that industry had several major accidents and they moved on. But my father continued to stay in aviation. He worked for Frontier Airlines. And then after Frontier Airlines, he moved on to the FAA as the chief inspector PMI with the professional mechanics inspector, and I always shared his passion for aviation, and that's what led me to enlisting in the Air Force and going into aviation from there.
Very interesting story. May he rest in peace.
Yes.
So now you're currently managing your own business. Before that, you worked for, you almost done everything in the corporate aviation industry, working for Part 91, working for Part 135, working for major trip support companies, working for the Air Force, and now you're managing your business. Was the shift easy from working for others to setting up and managing your own business? Do you see that you had all the skills needed to make that shift?
I had all the skills needed. My time with all the international trip support service companies that I worked with gave me a very good foothold to how I wanted to run my own company, that I wanted to run my own company with the passion of providing very personal services, being 100% accountable, and being able to provide our clients with very cost-efficient option of using our services versus using the other big box services companies. And that served our company and has always served our company very well. And one other big part of that, when I worked for these other four companies, I would go out on sales trips and I would visit with our clients. And one of the biggest issues was the accounting, the post-flight accounting. And that is a huge part for a lot of Part 91 small flight departments. They want to be able to go out to Cabo and back, and they want the billing to be complete within 1 week. A lot of these big companies could not do that because they're just too big, and they didn't give the time and the constraints to each customer and give them that personal service where we could end a trip and we could have the billing complete within 7 to 10 days max. And our clients really appreciated that. And that was a big stepping stone. I mean, it's great to be able to set up handling, set up permits, set up fuel, do all those things. But the post accounting is a big piece of this big industry and this big portion of the full services that an international trip support company can provide. Accounting is a huge piece.
So in brief, what you mean is small is beautiful. The clients are appreciating that you are a small company and they are finding the value for the money they are giving you, which means times are great for Atlas these days and the company is growing, as you mentioned.
The company has grown exponentially every year. We grew in 2008 when the stock market crisis hit, and we grew because we're more cost
sensitive or conscious.
They were cost conscious, and so they had their fellow pilots saying, "Hey, you got to reach out to Rick and Global Trip Support, Atlas Trip Support. You got to give them an opportunity. They are very cost efficient." Well, the same thing happened in the pandemic. Our industry kicked off, and that's, in various portions of our industry, cost is not an issue. But then when the pandemic hit in the past 2.5 years, I would say probably 60% of all new clients want to receive a estimate for the cost of services for their potential trip. And we always delivered that estimate, and we delivered it within 24, 48 hours. Pilots loved it. Pilots used our services.
So this means you rely on word of mouth marketing based on great service in growing your business and gaining your clients.
100%.
Very interesting.
We have over the years, we have marketed, we have produced t-shirts, Atlas Trip Support t-shirts, and we have sent them to our pilots, and they wear them proudly, and they have sent us pictures from around the world with their Atlas Trip Support t-shirts on.
Wow. So you're giving lessons to your clients, and based on that, you're gaining their trust and loyalty.
Absolutely.
Very interesting. Atlas Trip Support work on a global basis. You provide your services around the world, around the clock. I'm sure this poses many challenges. It's not easy to work in different countries, different continents, different regulation, economics, and logistics. What's your experience with that? How can you encounter and conquer these challenges?
Well, obviously the internet, since I started in the business in 1997, both from the flight planning standpoint, internet standpoint, a lot of that has been complex, especially on the flight planning side, but on the internet side, it has made the world a lot smaller and has allowed us to have better relationships with our handlers around the world. Previously to the internet, our best way of ensuring that we had credit and we could do business around the world was based on personal relationships through things like NBAA, through schedules and dispatchers, through international operations conferences, was establishing those relationships with those handlers. To this day, I have those relationships still with those people, but because of the internet, it has allowed us to have a bigger global footprint and to be able to establish relationships and guarantee payment. I mean, everyone wants to get paid for their services. I mean, our company has been burned for thousands and thousands of dollars. Like a lot of companies may be able to share with the same story. Nobody wants to lose money in this industry, but it happens. There's a lot of bad characters, a lot of bad apples out there. And it happens. But the internet has allowed us to have better relationships with our handlers and has allowed us to provide a better and seamless service for our clients. And so that's the biggest thing that I can contribute to the success of our company, is that the success of the internet, that we no longer have to rely on Afton and CETA and fax tools to do our business.
We're lucky to be living in the internet age. And due to these conferences, I know you, and we're talking together now. We met together, right, I think, in 2012 or 13 in the MBAA. I think it was in Vegas, correct?
Correct.
Very interesting. What about the US Air Force? Do you think the experience you gained there was of benefit to your career and to your business?
Absolutely. My first 15 years, I was in flight operations. I worked with pilots. I worked, I provided services to those pilots, both in services like flight records, flight operations. So it gave me a good understanding of pilots and how they think, how they operate. My last 8 years in the service. I worked for the State Department. I worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA. I worked in the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia, and I worked in the U.S. Embassy in Seoul, Korea. And one of our biggest missions for the Defense Intelligence Agency and the Defense Attaché Office and each embassy is to provide trip support services for Air Force One missions. And I handled 8 Air Force One missions, both in Saudi Arabia and in Seoul. And the logistics requirements for those trips segued into my life into corporate aviation. It just gave me a good foothold of the services that were required, both from a presidential visit to a multi-billionaire, the kind of services they require.
So working with all these VIPs, I'm sure there was a lot of stories, a lot of situations where you have memories that you think it's worth mentioning and sharing with listeners to the podcast. Can you share some stories with us?
Sure. I have a couple that I remember fondly, and one on the military side and one on the corporate side, that we were in Jeju-do, Korea, and we were there for a presidential visit by Bill Clinton, and we were there on the island for probably 2 weeks, ramping up for this visit. And the day of the visit, I walked through the operations center, and I went to shut a door, and the entire door shattered.
Wow.
And everyone was surprised and astonished, and it was like a bomb blew off. And we had to clean this up, and we had to move forward as quickly as possible because the president was coming in any moment. And another incident, most recently, we had a Part 91 client that's very well known in the TV world. I won't mention names, but they went overseas. They went to Avignon, France. They went to attend a wedding, and the client decided that they wanted to have a case of Don Julio 1942. And they wanted that as soon as they'd landed in Avignon, France. And it was a night flight. The aircraft was landing in the UK. It was landing in Paris before they landed in Avignon. And long story short, we were able to secure that case of Don Julio 1942 in Paris at about noon Paris time before they were to continue on to Avignon. And the client was extremely happy. They were using those that case. They were putting a bottle in each family's hotel room, and so it was a big deal for them. And they rewarded us on the back end very handsomely. But the reward was that we did it. We pulled it off.
That's amazing. This is what we call going extra mile for the client, which make the client happy and appreciate the service and come back again and again.
Right. Go ahead.
Yes. No. What about working? I wanted to ask you about working with Paul Allen.
That was very memorable. Paul Allen was a very quiet man. 99% of what we did for Paul Allen was international trip support services. We had a 3-hour call out. 3 hours
only. Wow. You have to arrange everything in 3 hours.
Yes, he could go anywhere in the world in 3 hours. Now, not all the time we could tell, he could go everywhere. But in our partnership with iJet, a lot of times we got him every place he wanted to go.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to hear this at your
Because
service.
iJet always pulled off the permits that we needed, even in very, very short notice. But and a big part of this industry is that we have to educate our clients that they cannot go anywhere and everywhere, no matter how much money they own or how much money they make in the time frame that they want. And so we continually educate. I mean, today I had at 5 p.m. I had a client say, I want to go to El Salvador tonight. I want to drop off 2 people and then come home deadhead. That's not going to happen. The airport they wanted to go to was going to close within an hour, and they just couldn't. I mean, it's a part of educating our clients. We love to meet expectations as much as we can. The reality, it is what it is.
I fully agree with you. Unfortunately, the world is not unified in terms of regulations, requirements, and airport environments and conditions, which vary from country to another. The open sky, which exists in Europe, the one sky, which is in the US, doesn't extend to the other countries. So there are differences which make it very hard sometimes to achieve mission. But I'm sure with your experience and connections like we do here, we many times make the impossible possible. I wanted to ask you about your motorhome. Why did you decide to set up your office in a motorhome? You're touring the US all year round from state to another. How is the experience?
Well, I would have to say that all this was precipitated by my wife saying that, we were living in Colorado. We were living in God's country. But I was so busy that I was not able to explore and benefit from being in Colorado as much as I would like to have been. My wife did, but she felt that, if I can't have you out on the mountains or hiking with me, then I'd rather have you on the road with me. So we decided, we had an estate sale, and you can imagine that I spent 21 years in the Air Force and my house looked like a museum. It was a museum from the Middle East, from Asia, from Europe, and we sold everything, made a ton of money. We decided to get into a motorhome in 2016, and we've been on the road since 2016. So now this is 6 years now we've been on the road. We've upgraded from a 39-foot motorhome to a 45-foot motorhome, which is the biggest you can be in. And we continue to be on the road. Obviously, the pandemic shut us down for the past 2 years. We've made some small trips. But the small trips that we've made, we've been able to actually see some clients in several places in the northwest and central part of the U.S. We are planning to leave 1 April from our current location. We're going to take 30 days to make it from Parker, Arizona to Key West, Florida. We're going to spend 30 days in Key West, Florida. And then after that, we're going to start our way up the East Coast, go up to Toronto, go up to Niagara Falls. I want to cut across to Chicago. We have a big client in Kenosha, Wisconsin, Waukesha, Wisconsin. So we're going to go see them. We're going to see as many clients as we can across the U.S. and our clients really appreciate seeing us.
What an amazing life, Rick. I know you invited me before and I didn't actually respond to the invitation. I look forward to visiting you and touring with you when the opportunity arises.
Anytime.
Thank you, my friend. One last question. With all this experience in aviation and in business, I'm sure you have some recommendations and some lessons to give to the listeners of AVIAPRENEURS podcast. Can you brief us in a couple of sentences? What do you recommend them and suggest them to use to succeed in aviation business?
Well, this business, you say what you say, you do what you do. And in a lot of industries that doesn't happen. And it's even more so post-pandemic that, we're living in a world of short staffing. We're living in a world of less product. But in our world, that just can't happen. I mean, a client comes to you and they want services, you have to deliver. And so you can't underpromise and you can't underdeliver. You got to meet the client's expectations. And that's what we always do. We're always very personable. I am part of this conversation that we've had. I haven't shared with you the fact that, I turned 64 this past week, and I am trying to turn my business over to my family. I have my daughter. I have actually my now 19-year-old granddaughter, who has now been working ops for the past year. And I am grooming them to take over the company.
Is she Lisa?
Lisa and Madison. Madison is Lisa's daughter. Mm-hmm. And there's several other people we have within the company, and I'm trying to groom them to take over the company. But the biggest point of view is that we provide seamless service, and we provide very personable service. We are accountable 24/7, and that's just how we live the business. And again, that's not only the operational side of the business, but one of my other daughters is working, and my wife is working on the accounting side. And accounting is a huge part of our business, and it's just as important as the operational side of our business. And some of those big box companies miss that. And that's why, we've always continued to pick up customers from all those big box companies just for this reason.
Thank you, Rick. I wish you long life, and I wish you health, and I wish the best for your family and for your business. It's a great pleasure and honor to talk to you today, and I look forward to meeting you in person very soon.
And I will end the conversation with, we could not be as successful as we are without our partnership with iJet.
Thank you, my friend. It's a great pleasure and honor. Thank you, fellow aviapreneurs out there. I'm sure you enjoyed the discussion with Rick like I enjoyed it. I'm sure you learned a lot like I did. I look forward to seeing you next week in a new episode of AVIAPRENEURS. Have a great day.